pop stars, welcome to this week's episode of the Popcorn Wind Down. I'm Eddie.
And I'm Tammy.
Thank you for joining us. This week's episode is not brought to you by the British royal family because they still refuse to believe that Meghan wasn't the first one and that they are actually descended from a black woman. And right now, they just generally suck. Hey, I'm just saying. So, this week, we visit an earlier iteration of said British royal family as we dive into the life of Queen Charlotte, who was reportedly half black and most definitely the love of crazy King George III's life. Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story, gives us a romantic, albeit fictional, glance into the early days of their relationship. So, Tammy, what did you think of Queen Charlotte? Was it a fairy tale romance for the ages or a nightmarish cautionary tale?
So Queen Charlotte, I will say, was the main story. I was bored. Let's put it there. I'll go into more details as we get into it, but the main concept is that I was not taken in by the love story of Charlotte and George.
Oh, wow. So it did not live up to the hype you had from the trailers.
No, it did not. It really didn't. And people were talking about it, and I did not see with what some people were saying about it. I just didn't see it. Like it's 6 episodes in the season, and it took about towards the end of episode 4, episode 5, really, before it really started to engage me, where I started to find the storyline interesting. At least the main storyline. What I will say is the main story of the love story of Charlotte, I was about to say Charles, of Charlotte and George was boring. But what kept me interested was all the secondary stories. I was interested in all of the secondary stories. I was enthralled with all of the secondary stories, but the main story that was supposed to pull you in and keep you there did not pull me in once.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I loved it. I'm gonna have to say it was better than I thought it was going to be. Even from the, Shonda. Uh, Shonda's one of those people, kind of like Jason Statham, Leonardo DiCaprio. If I know Shonda had a hand in it, if I know she produced it, if I know she wrote it, if I know she co-signed on it, then that's enough for me to at least watch it. I'm not going to say I'm automatically going to love it, but it's enough to get my eyeballs on it and my interest in it. She's just one of those people. She has that track record. She has some misses in her bag, but we all do. So I will say that. But I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed it. I will say that the story between Queen Charlotte and King George, it took it a while to get off the ground. I was interested in it, but I think it was one of those things. Here goes the editor slash writer in me. I think it was one of those things where you could have taken out some of what we're viewing as angst, I guess. Some of that was a bit redundant for me, but I did like their story, and for them, I can't disagree and say that it didn't take a moment. You know what it is? Okay, I think I found it. It's like that beautiful car. Like my dream car is the original Bond Aston Martin. I love classic cars. So it's like you got it, that 61, 63 convertible Aston Martin, gorgeous. Or that 65 convertible Mustang, gorgeous. Ready to go. And it's a beauty of a car. And you're excited to drive it. And when you start driving it, it drives good for a while, and then it starts hiccuping. Like it's like this. So I think that for me, it may have been the start and the stopping of the story. Do you think that might have been
it? No, because I kept waiting for it to stop so that it could go back to the present day story. Like, I get what you're trying to say, and I definitely get your analogy. But I'm gonna be honest, like when I say that I loved every single one of the secondary stories, I loved the connection of Queen Charlotte in what they consider to be present day within the show. Her and her children, her 13 children. I thought it was hilarious on how she had a certain perception of herself and her and how she was with her kids, and then all of her children had a different perception of who she was to them, and she never once got that what she thought she was to her children she actually wasn't to her kids. I love the Lady Dansbury and lady or viscountess, well, I guess she would just be lady at this point, lady Violet Bridgerton. I love their friendship and their connection. I think they matched up very, very well. I even loved when you went back in, like, in the past, and Lady Dansbury, I thought that she was the star of the show. The actress who played the younger Lady Dansbury was absolutely the star. I was so interested, and I wish that they spent even more time on her and her journey. Like, I want a second season, but I want the second season to be Lady Dansbury. Forget Queen Charlotte. I want the second season to be Lady Dansbury, a Bridgerton story. So I was more interested in the present day stories and their connection and the bonds there, or the secondary stories from the past, more than I ever was on Queen Charlotte and King George. Like, I just felt like it didn't mesh well to me. Their story of, George being the madman, like, I felt it was disjointed throughout the season. It was very, very disjointed. I could never fully grasp the connection and the that I should have with who they were ultimately going to become.
I think, and I think that's where the car comes in, the start and the stop. I can agree with the disjointedness. I thought the casting was amazing. Charlotte and George had amazing chemistry. Um, and and it's not, and I love the way, and I'm with you. I love the secondary stories. I love wove the time period, present day, which would be Bridget, the current seasons of Bridgerton that we're watching, um, how it would be present day picking up with the older version of Queen Charlotte and King George versus going back to the past when they intertwined those stories. That was great. And you know, but I think, like I said, I think it took the start and the stopping. It was disjointed. I get how he was mad. Like the whole episode, they showed everything. The one, what was it, five? That was basically about him and everything that he did to try to be normal for her. To
Mm-hmm.
That was gut wrenching. That was a lot. I think that episode probably should have, especially if you only had six episodes. Um, I think that we didn't get enough of them being together. And the history nerd in me actually went and did some research, and by all accounts, they were a modern day love story. They were really madly in love. They loved the hell out of each other. Obviously, I would say because they had 13 kids, 15 kids. Sex and love don't always go hand in hand, but as you saw, marriage, that was when marriage was really transactional, and basically the queen was there to birth the heir. Um, and by all accounts, it, like that episode where she asked him, "Do you love me?" Where she went to him in the thing and she said, "Do you love me? You've been staying away, blah blah blah." And she's like, "I will. If not, if you tell me to go away, if you tell me you don't love me, I will go have our baby, and I will live at Buckingham House, that they called it at the time, and we can live our separate lives and whatever." Well, by all accounts, most people would have just had the heir and the spare and been done or whatever. But so that part was true. So when I saw that, hey, they were actually crazy about each other. No pun intended. But I was like, okay. So I think for me it was the herky jerkiness of it. Like it wasn't a lot of continuity in their love story. And I get what they were trying to do to show. Um, but I think it would have been better served, especially since they were taking creative license as they so aptly put in the beginning. Um, Everything's based on real people, but the story we're telling is fictional in a sense. I think that they could have taken more creative license. Yes, once she found out that he was mentally ill, um, then I think it would have served us more to see them work through that as a couple together. I think that for me would have made the story stronger and richer rather than them spending so much time apart and us seeing her just so whiny and constantly obsessing over him. And I get that. Like I love that part where I think it was Brimsley who told her no. When like you alluded to her earlier, how she thought she was just this great mother, and her they finally tell her, no, you were never our mother. You were always our queen. And it was Brimsley who said you they were right because you lived, your world revolved around your husband. um, and not so much just as it being a queen, but I guess because his illness and her always worrying and caring about him, it was it was George, and then it was everybody else, and so and it wasn't a lot left over for everybody else. So I wish we could have seen more of that. Um, so I can agree with you, but the parts that we did see, I loved their story, and I wanted to see more of them together through the good, through the bad, um, instead of them always being apart and then coming together and then apart. And like I said, that the one episode that was mostly about him and what he went through to try to be normal for her, I would have put that sooner and then just kind of built from there. And I think that would have given us a little bit more. For those of you who were like you who didn't have as much of a vested interest, I think it would have given a bigger investment and better payout. But yeah, I agree. So do you at least think they had good chemistry, the actors?
It was I.
Okay. But I do agree that the secondary stories were compelling, and probably the most compelling one was Lady Danbury. Like, even like she's just a star, and the casting. I think we may have talked about it in our Bridgerton episodes. The casting is spot on. Like, whoever is Shonda's casting director for her shows, they do great. They do a great job. Like, it's rare that a character is ever miscast for a Shonda show. Um, and from just the likeness of the older um, Queen Charlotte to the younger Queen Charlotte, like you could really believe and you really saw these people maturing into the older versions that we get in present day Bridgerton. And just like Lady Danbury is a star and and you want more of her in Bridgerton series, you wanted I'm with you. I wanted more of her in this series. Like her story was so compelling. So Shonda has said that there might be more spin-offs of the prequels, and I'm with you. When I saw it, I was like, "Ooh, did we get a full Lady Danbury?" Because I believe we just pulled back one. I don't even I can't even say it's a full layer of her onion. God, why that sounds so perverted? That's not what I meant. But I feel like we didn't even pull back a full layer of her. It's just like there's so much to that character, and her story needs to fully be told. What did you like about
Black girl magic, yo.
her?
Like her fierceness, like it's true. I agree with you when you said the casting was perfection. On, I truly believe the young Lady Dansbury ultimately becomes the older Lady Dansbury. Like there was no question about it. Like it was just like I'm watching this series and I'm just like, yo, I want to know more. Like I want to know how ultimately does she continue to get referred to as Lady Dansbury? Because when she tries to get her son to become Lord Dansbury, once her son becomes Lord Dansbury and he marries, his wife would become Lady Dansbury. So I'm just like, whoa, because then she would be referred to as Lady Agatha. She could no longer be referred to by her last name, by the family name. At least, you know, that's the ton, because I watch a lot of, I read a lot of Regency books. Um, so just like how it turned into that, but I just think that she was just so fierce, and I love the fact on that even though she hated her husband, their marriage was in a way beneficial, right? Like, so she worked the marriage in a way. Like when her husband had his insecurities, she talked him down from it. When she realized, like, yeah, it all went back to every single time that his feelings was hurt, he wanted to have sex with her. And she was like trying to figure out a way to stop him from having sex with her all the time, because she married, like, her husband was this old dude who was already grown by the time she was born. So she marries this dude who's probably older than her father was. But it was just on even like the moments where she grabs his hand and she, like, you know, says, "You're just as good as the rest of them, and we are going to show them how good you are." And I was just like, yes. I said, support your husband, girl. Go for it. So I don't know. And like I loved the just the small storyline of her and Lord Ledger. I love that. I fully understood the decisions that they ultimately made when it came to, you know, their lives and their future, and but still saw like the absolute chemistry and what could have been with those two characters, and the possibility. So it was just, I just think that she was the best character of this season. I'm calling it now.
Okay. I agree with you. Like I think she it showed us that she's always been a G. Like when we get to
Mm-hmm.
her, and when we meet her in Bridgerton, she's a G. You know, she's the lady who knows everything. Nothing happens in the ton, as they call it, um, without her knowing about it. In the social circles, nothing happens without her approval. We got we understood why Lady Dansbury, or why the Danbury Ball or Dansbury Ball was always the first ball of the season, and we saw how that came to be. Um, got a better understanding, and we kind of got it in Bridgerton that she humanized Charlotte, because Charlotte was oblivious to everything and everyone around her. But Lady Dansbury, being part of her court, is the one who kept her, I guess, human, or in touch, or um, I can't even say grounded, because she's always had this air about her. She came from her own German aristocracy, and she married into aristocracy. I think it was easy to forget that she was 17 years old with no experience outside of that aristocratic bubble when she married George. And so at that one point where Lady Dansbury was telling her, "You're obsessed over a guy and whether or not he likes you," and I'm like, "But she's 17." you know. So it was just like, yeah, but I love that we get to see her, and some of her insecurities, and see her how she grows into the woman and becomes the woman she becomes. I loved how she played George's mom. Um, and I think that was probably one of my favorite scenes, the final scene between her and George's mom, Princess Augusta. Um, and just where, it was like she knew what was at stake, what was riding on her shoulders, and why it was so important for her son, to have that title, because what they had, someone could come just as easily take it away if they weren't titled. And she didn't want to give that up. It was like, she'd had too many of that man's big headed babies, and took too many Epsom salt baths, after the fact, to give it all up, to give it all back. And um I'm thinking, just, and that would be a great thing to see. to answer that question is how she kept the title. Because she hated her kids. It was obvious because I cracked up when she said, "Oh God forbid he puts another one of those big headed babies in me." And then when they were asking about her kids, and she goes, "All four of my children are thankfully off the continent." So I think they lived in America. So maybe because he didn't stay in England, um, and it didn't seem like that they had a close relationship once they grew up. Maybe because he wasn't in England, he didn't by default. He wasn't a part of that life by default. That title fell. She got to retain the title. I don't know. That would be something interesting to keep. But yeah, I just loved everything about her. And I loved her relationship with Charlotte. I loved the complexities of the relationship with her husband. She hated him, but she also knew what her job was, as far as being his wife and his support. And it was like, because one of the first times she went to him and about the ball is she was like, even though, um, like all the black people or the people of color in the ton, they got titled because Charlotte was black, and they didn't want her to feel what out of place, I guess is, or they didn't want to make it seem like they were out of touch, or I don't know. But so they gave all of the black people in the ton who had money, or some, I guess, who had some sort of social standing, they gave them titles. And so, and it was just like, but they gave them the titles, but they didn't have the respectability and everything else that came along with the titles. So they couldn't get into the clubs, they couldn't go on the hunts and all that kind of stuff until Lady Danbury went to, um, Princess Agatha, and they negotiated the deal. And it seemed like everything was a negotiation. And I thought that was so a great metaphor for how we have to fight and fight and fight for every little thing, you know? Um, but yeah, and I loved her relationship with, Lord Ledger, Lady Violet, Bridgerton's father. Um, you kind of saw it coming. I didn't know that they would actually go there, but like if we get another season, in the Lady Danbury story, I want to see more of it because I thought that was just so compelling. And I was like, we didn't. I get how he was the love of her life, but we didn't see enough of it. If that makes sense.
They had to make a choice. I don't think if we got a second season and it was Lady Dansbury, I don't think we would get anything between her and Lord Ledger, because it was a conscious choice that they made, that they had to cut ties with each other very early on because he was married.
I get that, but that's the thing. I want to see how it plays out because that there are times the angst of it would be more, and there may have been times where even though they made that choice, they slipped. Like people make choices all the time and don't necessarily follow through. I'm just saying there's more to that story. You know, there's more angst to it because they traveled in the same social circles. Their land abutted back to each other, and I get it. I get how that one person can come along for that one moment and just change your life so completely, and they can implant themselves into your soul and never let it go. But I still think there's more to that story to be told. I even want to see other Lady Dansbury lovers, the men who came and were never quite good enough. You know, I love the story with her, and that's the thing. The story between her and Charlotte's brother felt a little rushed, and I get because it wasn't their story to be told. So that's what I'm saying. If we had a Lady Dansbury, just a Lady Dansbury show, it could go back to those threads. We could see more of the walks between her and Lord Ledger. We can see what happens up to them making that choice, or just what happens after they make that choice. So there's more to be pruned from that tree, um, if we were to get our own story on both accounts. Um, and I loved how when Charlotte's brother was talking to her, she just kind of, and he was, and at first she was like, because when she told her what are we gonna call it? Was it her assistant, her housemaid, her what, her lady? Like, you know who I'm talking about? Her version of Brinsley. I don't know her name.
Oh, her lady's maid.
Yeah, but when she told her lady's maid, "Oh, I'm going to marry him and I'm going to go back to," and at first that seemed like she what she wanted, and then when he was telling her everything, you saw the face, the look on her face was like, "I don't want this. Oh, fuck no." And she was like, I can't be relegated back to that man. So, yeah.
She didn't want to have any more kids either.
No, she didn't. She was done with that life. And I think it also goes back to where after her husband died and she told her lady's maid, um, that, her whole life, her whole life had been about her husband. Like she was never allowed to figure out what she liked for herself, her favorite color, her favorite foods. It was all in service to him. She was pretty much raised for him. And I was like, damn. So, once she was rid of him, it was like, nah, she wasn't, you didn't see her falling back into that. So, I think that was pretty cool. Um, all right. What was another story that you thought was compelling?
Brimsley and Reynolds.
Yes, they
Um,
were so cute.
oh, I love them together. Like just from the beginning when you just knew, like when it was when they first asked, would you like a drink? And I was just like, that just seemed a little too proper. Like y'all about to go have sex. Like I just automatically was like, y'all about to bang it out. And then when they got into the room and then they started going at it, and I was just like, called it. But even like when Brimsley finds out when he goes into the cellar to look for Reynolds and they're talking, he was just like, if you're looking for another writer, at least have somebody at your station. And he was just like, I'm not looking for another writer. And Brimsley's like, whatever. And he's like, no, all honesty, I'm not looking for another writer. And I'm just like, the innuendo for it all. Or the fact of saying, I loved it. One of my favorite scenes from the series is when they're dancing at the ball that Queen Charlotte and King George III throws at Buckingham plate not place house, and they're like dancing under the tree, kind of in the dark, in the shadows, and I just thought they were really cute. Like I really liked that. And my one question was, what happened to Reynolds? Where's Reynolds? Because you don't see him in the present day. You only see him in the past. So and Brimsley's all alone in the present day. So especially when he's like dancing by himself, and that kind of hit me a little hard. So I was just like, oh, what happened to Reynolds? But I love that storyline. That one was really, really good. I already talked about loving the Lady Dansbury and Lord Ledger storyline as well. That really, really entertained me. Um, and then also, like I said, the present day scenes, Charlotte and her kids. I love that on how she had a certain perception of herself, and she kept saying, "I was a good mother," and everybody's looking at her like, "Oh, you're the queen, so we can't like tell you no," but and then her kids was just like, no, you were not a mother, you were a queen. And it was just some very significant scenes that came about that really kept me interested, that kept me invested. I wanted to see what happened with certain characters throughout the series. And if they do a second season, I wouldn't want the second season to be about Charlotte. I've already said that. I would like it to be about some of the secondary characters. Even like I agree with you on the Lady Dansbury and Princess Augusta. They're back and forth. I thought it was really, really good when she was crying and she said, no, you do not come here to cry. Be like, I don't like you, but I like the fact that you're my adversary and you're a worthy adversary. And she basically was telling her, I need you to suck it up and let's get back to the conversations that we normally have. Like, this is entertaining to me, and you're trying to make this emotional, and it's not an emotional situation. I was just like, dang, but I agree. Come on now, get tough it up. But so yeah, so that's what kept me interested in the series overall.
Yeah, I agree. I had the same thing. I think great minds. I wrote down pretty much the same thing about Brimsley and Reynolds. Like, I want to know, they were so adorable together, and that just that love, that had to be secret for a lot of reasons, but mainly at that particular time. excuse me, because of who they were employed by. But it was just, you know, I just love seeing them together. And I was like, yes, what happened to Reynolds? Like, did he die? And I was like, did he die of scurvy or something? I was like, no, they ate pretty well. Did he get the plague or something? Like, what happened to him? Um, and then the scene at the end where he was dancing alone and we saw him, it was juxtaposed with him dancing with Reynolds at the ball that Charlotte and George threw. Um, yeah, that nearly broke me. Like it hit you, girl. I think I had a sniffle. I didn't quite have a tear, but I had a sniffle. I was like, oh man. And yeah, the scene with Lady Dansbury and Lady Augusta, I talked about that one. That was a particularly good one. I also like the scene where she was telling Charlotte about sex, and she's like, "You do know what happens, right?" And Charlotte's like, "I kind of have an idea, maybe." And so she's like, "Oh gosh, we're gonna need charcoals, lots and lots of charcoals." And then you saw the drawings, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" And I was like, "But this is real. This is how it happened." And I think it was an episode of Bridgerton, I can't remember, where Lady Violet said that we never talk to our girls about that. We tell them how to be a wife, or we tell them that they should be a wife, but we don't talk to them about the intimacies in marriage. And and back then it was rare. And it takes me to another really, really powerful scene. And I think the scene that kind of where they started to become truly friends, not just social acquaintances, not just people, ladies who ran in the same circle and gossip, not ladies who were part of the Queen's court or whatever, but truly became friends, is when they were at the church and she was mourning, Lady Violet was mourning her husband's birthday. And because she no longer got to make him the hats, the silly hats that she had passed on as a tradition from her father to her husband and her family. And and when not Queen, but when Lady Dansbury told her she was lucky and she didn't understand, you know, and it was like, no, you're lucky. And I think the audience, we understood what she was saying because we saw her marriage, and how she despised her husband. Like she literally danced a jig when he died. you know. Um, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But so it was like she was saying you're one of the lucky ones who truly had a marriage where you were able to love your husband, where it was about more than just you being the breeder or his personal nursemaid or whatever. Like you knew Lady Violet and her husband, they shared the same room and the same bed most nights or every night. It wasn't, hey, just come in here for sex and then you go away. Like her husband, after the first time, I think it was the first time that they did it, if you can even call it that, where she was getting up and her husband said, no, you can stay, you know. And that's because they had separate rooms back then. But yeah, so I think that scene in the church, and then when she went to Lady, when Lady Dansbury goes to Lady Violet or Lady Bridgerton and explains to her what she meant, um, and how they become friends, and then when Lady Bridgerton was when her flower was starting to bloom.
Oh my God, that whole conversation was hilarious.
At the museum, she's like, huh? And she's like, oh, and then she felt so embarrassed. And I'm like, oh, that's sweet, the propriety of it all. Because, with your girlfriend, she'd be like, I'm horny as hell. I mean, that's just who we are now.
Mm-hmm.
But with the girl talk, but that conversation about the flower in bloom, I'm like, I wonder if I say that to my friends, will they understand what I'm saying? Or would they just think I'm being me and be like, what the hell are you talking about? But yeah. And then I shouldn't say this. This sounds morbid, but the scene where Lady Danbury, when her husband dies, and I'm thinking, well, at least he was finished.
He wasn't done yet. He hadn't done the kind of thing.
Oh,
He wasn't done.
and then she goes to check on him, And she gets on the shock, and I'm like, "Don't you cry? Don't you spill those crocodile tears?" And then she looks, and she's in shock. And then she's like, "Oh shit, is he dead? He dead."
Dead,
And she
dead.
go, and then she goes and tells her maid, "We will not have to do those baths as often." And she's like, "What?" And she's like, "Huh? Why not? But you." And her maid looked at her like, "Oh, don't tell me you fell in love with that fool." And then she was like, "No, we won't have to do the bath." And then when she gets it, they sit there and they kind of dance around a little bit, and then she's like, "Okay, okay," and then she's like, "All right." And then I felt like a director was like, "Okay." When she ran into the room, she's like, "Well, hold on, give me a minute." I felt like a director was back there going, "And scene," because the maid starts yelling, and I'm like, just all of that from the maid's fake surprise, like, "Okay, let me go in and make sure that my lady is proper." And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, that was too much." That was funny. Um, but yeah, okay. Is there anything else? You know what? I know this is kind of. I could even go for. Do you think maybe? I don't know. I love. Okay, I know you said you don't want to see Queen Charlotte and necessarily King George be the focus of another season. I
Hmm.
would love to see them in another season, especially if it's about the primary character is Lady Dansbury. I would love that, and I would just kind of love to see them fill in some of the blanks because I know even though he was probably dealing with schizophrenia, and they say more than likely bipolar disorder. I would love to see them in the moments where the mania hadn't set in. Like I would love to get a less uh, disjointed version of them. I really would. But anyway, do you think there is enough for a Brimsley Reynolds story, or would they just have to kind of be fit in? And I don't know where you could fit them in a story that wasn't necessarily like they deserve a Christmas movie or a Christmas special or something just to fill in those blanks. Like I guess
I
I
feel
want
like
more.
that would be more of the thing. Like if they did like a quick, you know, side story of Brimsley and Reynolds or the help kind of thing, right?
Yeah, like a two
I
parter or something.
Yeah,
Two
like I would
two
I
four
would love
parters.
that, just to kind of see and have the focus be on Brimsley, Reynolds, and the palace rather than Queen Charlotte and King George, and let them be the background, just so you can really get, because I felt like their story was so like, I would like to know, how did they get together? How did
Yeah.
they work it out? Because to know that when you were basically separated, um for majority of the series, you could see like they spent whole years apart from each other, living in different homes, and then would have to walk in order to meet, and they never had conversation. So it was very rare that they met up, and just how that worked for the relationship that they ultimately developed. Like, how did they survive all that time when they were not consistently together? Like, it would just be a very interesting story, but not a season. I wouldn't see them being a season, but maybe a side story, holiday thing, like you said. Maybe it could be around the Christmas tree that Queen Charlotte would have every single year, or something to that effect. But I would like to see kind of how they develop and what ultimately happens to Reynolds.
Yeah, I think that would be cool. And I just saw it, like, as she was saying more gold, he would flash back to, just I think it would be great. And you could throw in some other people, show what the palace was like at Christmas, show basically how she was with that whole village of fucking kids. Um, and just for those who are wondering, just a side note on historical aspect before we wrap this up. So the nerd in me, I did the research. The Edward and Victoria, no, Edward and what was her name? Sophie. The son that had the son after King George's King George the Fourth's daughter Charlotte died. She would have been the heir, the next in line. But when she died, that was what pushed Queen Charlotte into wanting her children to settle down and make an heir because she didn't want the line to die. And so the one that actually had the child was Sophie and Edward, and that was her fourth child. Their daughter is Queen Victoria. She's the second longest reigning monarch besides Queen Elizabeth, and she is Queen Elizabeth's great great grandmother. So that is where that line comes from. That is how this current line, just in case people were wondering when I said at the beginning, how is the modern royal family connected to Queen Charlotte? That is how. She would be Queen Elizabeth's grandmother, great grandmother, three times removed. So yeah. So her great 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 grandmother. There you go. Oh, there's your history lesson. See, the more you know. All right. How are you rating? I'm kind of scared. How are you rating Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story? And do you have
Um,
anything else first before? Sorry.
no, no, you're good.
Okay.
Um, I'm gonna rate Queen Charlotte.
Siri, I was not talking to you. I didn't even say, hey, Siri. See, they just be spying on us, man.
It's always Siri and Alexa.
See,
Um
AI. See?
so for Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story, I am going to give it 2.5 popcorns. Like
Oh,
I
damn.
said, it took up to the fifth episode before I really became engaged. I was never fully invested in the main character story of Queen Charlotte and King George. I was more invested in all of the secondary characters as well as the present day storylines that were going on with Queen Charlotte, her children, and then her connection and vibe with the older women of the ton. So yeah, so 2.5 popcorns. What about you, Eddie?
I am going to rate it, but I do have one more thing I have to ask, and maybe this will change your rating. What do you think is going to happen between Lady Bridgerton and Lady Violet now that Lady Violet knows about her and her father? Like, do you think I think that should be something that's carried over? Do you think that should be something that waits to a different prequel, or do you think they should pick up that thread in current Bridgerton?
I think they addressed it in the series. One thing that's great about Bridgerton is they don't have to talk about everything. And they said enough without saying anything really on the fact of Violet let Lady Dansbury know, I know about you and my father. And Lady Dansbury basically said, I've been with more men than that. And we're not going to talk about whatever you've discovered about me and your father. Like, she said all of that with a few sentences, and I think that that's been addressed, and I don't necessarily think there's anything to expand on it between her and Violet.
That and I would agree. I would almost agree, except I would say that look shows me that Violet is not satisfied and she wants to have a conversation. Like
Just being nosy.
she had more questions, and I think Lady Dansbury was just trying to deflect about yeah. I never told the line where she said, "I never told you about Queen Charlotte's brother." Um, I think she was deflecting because we know that was not the man who turned out to be the love of her life. But yeah, okay. Um, I still think I think we're gonna get some more of that. I do. I don't. I think that's just a thread that has not been quite pulled. Um, okay, so I am going to give Bridgerton, Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story. I give it 4 stars. I obviously enjoyed it more than you did, but I still would love. I don't necessarily need another season focusing on Queen Charlotte and King George, but I would love to see more of their story told in not such a disjointed manner. So I would love to see them maybe in other prequel stories like the side characters or a secondary story. I think that would be kind of interesting. It almost makes you feel um, sorry, not sorry, but view King George empathetically, I guess, a little bit from a fictional standpoint because he was kind of weird, and I guess it was his madness, but he in American history he is one of the villains. Let me put it that way, especially
Well,
the
you
Earl.
find out doing the research. because I also did the research on the backstory of Queen Charlotte and King George III, and you find out for him to be such a madman, because they said it happened really early in his life. And what the storyline said, it is true that he was already basically going mad, as they used it back then. He was already going mad before he actually married Queen Charlotte. So that means he wasn't running the country. He came into power in 1760, which means that he came into power in the middle of the French and Indian War. Um, towards the end, and all the laws that were passed, yes, it had his stamp on it, but just based on like some research and reading up on it, that means that he basically wasn't running the country, and it was more Parliament that made the decisions. And then because he was the head of state, he ultimately takes the fault of being the tyrant and being the villain of the whole situation. But he wasn't mentally fit necessarily to fully run the country. Other people were running the country for him in his name. And you just get that from like researching, what was going on at the time. Because when they say that it happened very early on in their marriage, where it got to the point where like she only had like maybe 10, 15 years tops of him being lucid enough to really connect with her and be fully there with her. But then he started to lose his mind by that point. And when she ended up dying, they said it was to the point where he didn't even know who she was, and they weren't even like in the same area together. So he most likely didn't even know that she died when she did die.
Yeah, he died. He was blind, deaf, and completely out of it. When he died, he died 2 years after she did in 1820. The War of 1812. He was not running the country. His son, King George IV, was the Prince
Yeah.
Regent. So the last 10 years, he definitely did not have a say in it. And I said earlier, I'm surprised that even because the royal family, they recycle the names, and I'm like, I'm surprised William and Kate picked George, um, after the man who basically lost the country, their most powerful or their richest colony, uh, 2 times. But yeah, that was just a joke. But yeah, you do get the feeling that he was made the scapegoat a lot, but he still remains the villain in our American story. Anyway, so I guess that does it for this week's episode of the Popcorn Wind Down. Be sure to join us. Oh, I'm sorry. That does it for this week's episode. Be sure to listen, like, follow, and comment anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, including us. You should have us bookmarked already. You can also keep up to date on the latest in entertainment pop culture news, as well as other amazing kernels of pop culture goodness at the popcornwinedown.com. That's it. That's the plug.
Pop, pop,
Pop it,
pop, pop,
pop,
pop,
pop,
pop,
pop, pop,
pop.
pop. Next week is the week I've been waiting for. Next week's episode. I'm so excited. It's going to be the Fast 10, Part 1. I spoiled it. Yes, I said Part 1. That is not a misnomer. I am not misspeaking. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Aren't you excited?
No.
You're not excited about the Fast 10?
No.
How are we even? How are we even friends?
You remember, your guilty pleasures are not my guilty pleasures.
How are we still even friends? It's a K-pop star. She does not mean that. Jason Momoa, Jason Statham, the Jasons in the same movie. Like, how can you not be excited about that? Anyway, be sure to catch us next week when we talk about the Fast 10, Part 1. Until next time, I'm Eddie.
And I'm Tammy. Bye.
Bye. Peace.